So Shabbat Shalom all.
Shabbat Shalom.
And it's good to see all those of you who are here, because considering the conditions and the weather, and for you in YouTube land, we here in the Edmonton area have been in the proverbial deep freeze for what, at least a week, 10 days? Feels longer. I'm just getting the feeling back in my fingertips again. So, yeah, I think we've maxed out with wind chills overnight at minus 40 something, and daytime highs have been minus 30 something with wind chill. So, but we're coming out of it, we're told. All this cold spell is ending, and that's what it is. It's a spell. It's witchcraft is what it's doing. But we've got this thing beat.
And our igloos are warm.
Exactly. Yes, we a little melty that way, but yeah, you can tell it's cold when the people in Siberia are saying, "Psst, Boris, could be worse. You could be in Edmonton," you know. But boy, a thought came to me today. I have those every once in a while. A thought just comes to me. But if ever there was a vivid illustration of Matthew 24, 20 and 21, which says, "Pray that your escape will not happen in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great trouble." Like you can't start the vehicle. It's pretty much, yeah. But that's it today. Now you know probably why that was said, when they have to experience these kinds of conditions. But we did it, because we're hardy Canadians, hardy Edmontonians. And we're, second to last day of the official calendar year of 2017. Can we imagine what 2018 is going to bring us? 2018 is right around the corner. Not that corner. There, I see it. 2018 is that close. Can you imagine what 2018 will unveil in this surveillance society in which we live? You know, as it is now, I mean, there's cameras everywhere. Every stoplight, first of all, they told us, well, that the stoplight is a red light camera. It's just for your safety and protection, and we want to make sure get the speeders and the lawbreakers off the streets. But they're more than that, and now they're at every intersection and every store and convenience store and bank, anywhere we pretty much do business. Cameras are there, and it's not just cameras. I mean, well, now cell phones have as good cameras as that you would buy in a Photoshop, and they can record videos. They can certainly take good pictures, and it's even more than cell phones. I mean, we have televisions that watch us, kitchen appliances that watch us, smart meters that watch the whole house, computers, you pretty much name it. Smart technology. Even don't they have even like little, I don't know what you call them. I've seen commercials like robots that do vacuuming and things like that.
Sure, you're
Is it called
Roomba.
Roomba? Or yeah, well, so they have even that, all this sophisticated technology.
Your fridge tells you what you have in it when you're out shopping, what you need to buy.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's not my fridge, but yes.
Yeah,
But there are, well, yeah, I shouldn't be saying wow, it's not even surprising that that kind of technology exists, and all of it predominantly is to allow Big Brother to watch us. That's what I've called this message. Big Brother's real and evil.
You said appliances? What kind of appliances?
Microwaves,
I never thought of that.
yeah. And that's just part of it. Well, like Shelley just said,
Fridge, yeah,
fridges will contact you when you're shopping and say, oh, yeah, pick up butter or whatever you need. You know, even George Orwell, who wrote 1984, his book wasn't even as grim as we actually do have it right now. And he was the one who predicted that the cameras would be watching us in our homes. He just failed to predict that we would be the ones going out and buying the surveillance stuff and putting it in our homes. Basically fearing that, oh my gosh, I hope somebody is watching me. But then, of course, the technology companies have persuaded millions of people, because of pride, to go out and get these cameras and install them themselves, and then allow who knows who, besides government agencies, to invade privacy. Yeah, of course it's people doing all of this, but who has power over all the many minds that control the world? Satan. Crazy things, and when we hear and see of crazy things happening in the world, those crazy things have a way of getting too much help to make them just happen. And we're going to just take a retrospective of about 2 decades. How many of you remember Columbine, that Columbine, Colorado high school massacre? Well, that's almost 20 years ago now. It was 1999 that occurred. And did it turn out to be just a bunch of radicals bent on doing what they did? Or were they mind controlled and triggered to do exactly what they did? Or how about the recent Las Vegas sniper attack? That's just, well, now I guess about 3 months old. I think it was the 1st of October that this happened. Or even preceding it, the attack on a Republican playing baseball, a Republican senator was playing a game of baseball in a Washington residential community baseball diamond, and he was attacked. Or that Boston Marathon massacre. Or the more recent rioting mobs all across America, predominantly rioting because they're protesting President Trump and his administration. And there's a myriad of other false flag events, and that they've all transpired quite recently, certainly in the last decade. And if you really want to know whether something is legit or just a planned diversion, look at the circumstances surrounding the event, because going back to Columbine, now almost 20 years ago, almost immediately after that incident, gun legislation that had been stalled suddenly passed. So there's your real reason for what went on at Columbine. It was all about the gun control agenda. And this supposed lone sniper in Las Vegas who opened fire and caused such chaos, without a doubt, another mind-controlled pawn triggered to take the fall, a patsy. And why? It was all about instilling fear and justification in the public for the Homeland Security Gestapo agency and the domestic army within the United States to just proclaim martial law and steal and confiscate Americans' rights and liberties. See, if they, and by they I mean the elite, the globalists, Big Brother of today, if they are going to declare war on domestic terrorism and then spend billions of dollars creating Nazi agencies, then they've got to make them look needed and the terrorism real. And should anybody ever witness these events going on and question their validity or threaten to expose the truth surrounding them, they are randomly eliminated. Did you know that ever since that Las Vegas shooting that went on just 3 months ago, people, and by people I mean civilians, who were actually caught in the crossfire there in Las Vegas but survived, yet they saw what was really going on and could say, well, there wasn't just one place that was shooting. We saw a number of instances where things were happening, that guns were going off and there was crossfire going on. Ever since that time, systematically, people have been eliminated through motorcycle accidents, car crashes, and of course, Big Brother's most favorite weapon, the sudden heart attack. The CIA invented and has had in their possession for use a heart attack gun since the 1960s. It shoots ice bullets, much smaller, much thinner, but it shoots ice bullets that are filled with shellfish toxins. So when this ice bullet hits its intended target, all it leaves essentially is just a little red dot on the person's body. It looks like just a scratch or something that you would not suspect. And then of course, once this ice bullet enters the body and encounters the body's heat, it melts, it releases the shellfish toxins, and the result is almost sudden death through heart attack. That's one of Big Brother's favorite weapons. There's really a dangerous element playing out on the unsuspecting people of America particularly today. and it's being hidden amongst all the black ops government programs that's buried within the intelligence community, the security agencies, and the military. I was led to do some review of Bill Cooper's material in putting together this message. In my opinion, Bill Cooper had the most profound understanding possible of the New World Order takeover agenda and the planned dissolution of all the sovereign nations under a one world government. And his information, when I look back at it and started reading what he was saying is sobering in its description of how this takeover is being carried out, because it matches perfectly what is going on in the world right now. And he spoke these words in 1998. Listen to the timeline of this. He found out first about this plan when he discovered documents somewhere between 1970 and 73. In those 3 years, he came across documents. Well, it was easy for him to find them because they were coming across his desk, because he was a member of the intelligence briefing team of the Commander-in-Chief, that's the U.S. Pres, of the United States Naval Fleet. And those documents outlined a plan for the formation of a world totalitarian socialist government to be ruled by a behind-the-scenes council of wise men. A so-called benevolent dictator will be presented as the Messiah, and he realized that what he was reading back in the 70s, that's going on almost 50 years ago, that's how far back everything that's going on now was pre-planned. He realized that this was all about a total destruction of the United States. Bill Cooper predicted 9/11. He also predicted that Barack Obama would have this meteoric rise to spearhead the final implementation of this totalitarian one world government and end the Bill of Rights in the US. He knew absolutely back then in the 70s that this was the plan for the destruction of the United States of America. Again, Big Brother is very real and very evil, with many methods to deceive unsuspecting mankind. Like, and we've talked about this before, ELF mind control. ELF stands for extreme low frequency radio waves that mimic our natural brain waves. This is high-tech warfare, and it's not only used to brainwash and control people, it's used to physically attack them as well. This is the stuff of science fiction. Have you ever stopped and considered that phrase and asked, what is science fiction? I mean, when we see movies based in sci-fi mode, what are they always showing us? What are they always telling us about?
Things that haven't happened.
Yeah, essentially it's the future foretold. But it's called science fiction, and truth is often masked under that term, fiction, so that we don't think it's real. What we're watching, oh, that's just Hollywood and their imagination. That's called predictive programming. Implants and mind control technology are very real. They've been established and they are a certifiable fact about which mainstream media, fake news, keeps silent. The technology that we see in these sci-fi movies exists. The hardware is in place. The patents are on record. And the agencies to run and control it are in and have been in place for 60 some odd years. Did you know that in America, America is a big focus for all the New World Order agenda and the elite and the globalists because, well, we're told America is Manasseh. It was so blessed by Father God to be as powerful and wonderful and rich and successful nation that it had become. So that's why so much of the focus of these attacks are on America. They want to bring it to its knees. But in America, there are at least 500,000 to 600,000 cell phone towers. And here's the story of a couple of them. It's a story. So once upon a time, there was a telecommunications and underground utilities construction company, pretty large one at that, but still owned by your everyday average, ordinary, Joe average, hard-working guy who was given many contracts to involve connecting electricity and fiber optics and other means of power to underground bases in Arizona, Nevada, California, New Mexico, and Texas. Now, he just wasn't handed these contracts. He had to undergo some serious background checks, as well as sign off on documents of confidentiality, which told him never to divulge where these contracts were coming from and where the site for building these cell towers was. So he agreed, signed off, and then he got all sorts of lucrative contracts, many of them, to build and construct these cell towers. And he always wondered why, whenever he constructed a tower, why they, his employers, wanted so much electrical power in these cell towers. And he also wondered why, at a certain point of the construction process on every tower that he worked on, at a very specific moment, the military would show up, as in an Army Corps of Engineers, and they would install frequency amplifiers connected with what was stamped HXXRP. HXXRP is a communications protocol only used by the NSA. Now, the company owner, the fellow who was building all these cell towers, could never verify it, but he thought, this is a module to control the weather. Now, we people, have a frequency pattern that we emit. Shouldn't be a big surprise. We've talked about this before. We have an energy field, we have a frequency at which we vibrate, everybody. However, these cell towers and Wi-Fi towers interfere with those frequencies. The cell towers operate in the gigahertz range. Going to get a little bit technical, but I'll explain it as best I can and make it as simple as I can. But the cell towers operate in the gigahertz range, and our brain cannot interface with that high a frequency. Now, all frequencies have a penetration depth, and they will typically hit 100% attenuation, big fancy word. Have you ever seen, what do they call them, EKGs? Is that when they're monitoring your heart? Yeah? EKGs on a graph or on a scope, you'll see spikes and drops and spikes and drops. Well, an attenuation is the peak of the amplitude. So all frequencies have a penetration depth that typically hits 100% amplitude, the spike of the peak, at about half a wavelength. And for a 1 gigahertz signal, this is approximately 7 inches. When microwaves hit water, they turn into heat. In fact, when any electromagnetic wave gets absorbed by a conductor in a conductive medium, like water, it does so by turning into electricity, which then shorts itself out in the conductor, in the conductive medium, and the resulting current flow is what causes the heating. This is exactly how an electric current can be induced into our brain through a 1 gigahertz radio signal, which will fully absorb at a depth of approximately 7 inches. If you have higher frequencies with shorter wavelengths that can be used, then you don't need the 7 inches of penetration depth. Now, in wireless communications, that term hertz is named after the scientist who discovered it, Heinrich Hertz. But it refers to the transmission frequency of radio signals in cycles per second. So 1 hertz is 1 cycle per second. 1 megahertz is 1,000,000 cycles per second. 1 gigahertz is 1,000,000,000 cycles per second. You still with me? Hang in there. The tough stuff's over. Okay, so earlier we already established how you can use a radio wave to deliver electricity. Now you take that gigahertz waveform from a cell tower, which will penetrate approximately 7 inches into a person's skull, and you put unintelligible high-frequency electricity there, but modulated with that ELF wave, the extreme low-frequency radio wave, which can interface with your brain, and bada bing, bada boom, you have cell phone tower-induced mind control. One of Big Brother's favorite weapons that used all the time. Mr. Obama and his crew, before his first election win, used a lot of it. Because after he was elected and after he had been in office for a while, people were saying, how did I even vote for this guy? What the heck was I thinking? Well, they weren't. They were mind controlled. And if an ELF waveform was transmitted by itself, it would need a really large antenna, many miles or kilometer long antenna to pick it up properly. And it will not interface with our body very well because our body is just not a big enough antenna in which that ELF wave can efficiently short itself out. So in our country, in North America predominantly, Wi-Fi is limited to 20 milliwatts power. That's not an awful lot, really. Tiny amount. And still, with that tiny amount of wattage that's being transmitted, you can connect with Wi-Fi easily from hundreds of feet away. You don't need any elaborate antenna or other kind of hardware. You just connect with it. And our cell phones, yours and mine, transmit about 300 milliwatts, or over 10 times the power of a Wi-Fi. And the range of a cell phone is way better. So considering all of that, all you and I need to make a very perfectly working, functioning cell node, not a tower, is about a 10 watts transmitter, make sure it gets good penetration into surrounding buildings, and a receiver that's more sensitive than the one in your cell phone because you're talking back with less than 10 watts. And 10 watts is 500 times as strong as your wireless router that comes in perfectly everywhere. That's why a neighbor can piggyback on your unsecured router with like 20 milliwatts of power from blocks away. So remember the story of Joe Average, the guy who was building these towers, who got all the contracts? Well, he was, as you would expect, a technical kind of guy, and he paid attention to these cell towers that he was building, and he always noticed that they seemed to have a 400 kVA, that's a kilovolt amp generator running the tower. 400 kVA is approximately 400,000 watts. So why on earth would they be fed so much juice when you and I could set up a perfectly functioning, legitimate little cell tower on the backyard lawn ornament and get perfect cell phone coverage with less juice than you'd need to charge the average iPad? Cell towers, in fact, only get anywhere from 20 to 60,000 watts. That's, they sign off it. They being the government, it's all legal. They give you documentation at these cell towers saying they're pumping no more than 20 to 60,000 watts. Okay, fine. Now, 630 CHED, AM radio station in Edmonton, pumps out 50,000 watts of power. In fact, all AM radio stations in Canada can, at maximum, pump out 50,000. Most do. FM's 100,000. However, don't know if any of you have ever taken a drive from here to Calgary and had it on CHED. You can listen to CHED at 50,000 watts on position it is on the dial, right into Calgary. In fact, you can listen if you've got a good radio in Calgary in a home, and CHED will come in like a local station as long as the climate conditions are right. So to sometimes pump even more than that into a single neighborhood via a local cell tower, which is only serving about a kilometer or 2 mile directional feed, because all the antennas on the cell tower are directional. They're not omnidirectional. It's like a tractor beam in one direction. If you're pumping more than 60,000 watts, that's way beyond suspicious. Those cell towers are not what we have been told they are. And even 60,000 watts would be a conservative estimate for many of them. So where Where do you think the rest of those 400,000 watts are going? Yeah,
Ionosphere?
it does, yeah, it can, but it could be pumped out, and it is, to the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, places like the Philippines, Tokyo, places that have caused Hurricane Katrina and tsunamis and whatever other earthquake or natural disaster they need to accomplish for political purposes. And when there's something else you need to know about radio waves, they can be steered. So just because a cell tower appears to only place all of its radio frequency output in one direction within a confined zone, that doesn't mean that a signal cannot be diverted and sent elsewhere. That's because a neighboring cell tower can be synchronized in such a way that it steers the output from surrounding towers to a new remote area. And that is exactly how HAARP works. High Altitude Auroral Research Project, that's run by the military, US government, NSA, CIA people. That's how they do it. And that's why they have this acre upon acre up in Alaska, fenced off with all these cell towers in rows, side by each. Yes, Pastor
I
Hugh?
was just going to mention, it sounds like they made a HAARP system right across the country.
Yeah, pretty much. With those Gwen towers, as well as, yeah, the cell towers and the Wi-Fi towers. This is all about geoengineering the environment, weather modification. It's weather warfare is what it is. However, the governments keep this kind of stuff secret because, well, guess what? Then they can blame and tax residents for climate change. And hence your carbon tax is born. Lies and deception from the very real and very evil Big Brother. So mind control technology and implants are absolutely real. Often those who have been implanted with chips get attacked from various physical ailments, things like depression, befuddled thinking, loss of memory, stress, not being able to cope, manic behavior, system damage, heart attacks, cancer, dizziness, chest pains, dehydration, headaches, migraines, and most of those attacks occur either when you're sitting in front of a computer or when you're in bed. One type of ELF technology requires implants to be effective, so implantable chips were discovered. And now here we are, some 60 years later after they were discovered originally, and we're just hearing about it and people think, oh, this is brand new stuff, this is great new technology. Most of us have been implanted from the time we've been born through vaccinations, flu shots, tetanus shots, virtually through any type of medical or dental work performed on us. Our medical community suppliers have implanted our hospitals with products that are loaded with chips. And which programs are they following? The beast agenda. They're preparing the world for Antichrist. Okay, here's something to ponder on the gear and the equipment and the information that I've shared with you to this point. When we're being targeted, and it's pretty obvious we are, it's safe to conclude that we are the enemy. We've been made the enemy. We're especially targeted on the internet. Not only do many of the relevant internet companies store our personal emails and surfing habits, they are pushed by various forms of governments to do that for at least 5 years. So between the military, the CIA, the FBI, NSA, CSIS in Canada, and the local police, we're monitored browsing the web. We're monitored using all the major social networks, and also big time in video games. And in case you're thinking, come on, how can they possibly have that many people to do all this monitoring? Well, they're using AI, artificial intelligence, in countless forms to catalog and chronicle all the data they can. They even use artificial intelligence to assess bloggers' moods. They look for hate speech, other subversive, as they call it, subversive behavior. And this is all for domestic citizens. We're not talking about those in third world countries who are running ISIS, well, I guess just following the orders of the United States and leading ISIS. We're talking about domestic citizens. They monitor those who support the Constitution in the US, those who they claim are and deem to be conspiracy theorists, and certainly believers, big time. And it's, just the last few years ago, everybody thought that the idea of artificial intelligence that might be used to analyze and report to law enforcement, they thought that was all questionable. It was like, come on now, seriously, this is just like the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise. But now, Facebook is bragging that it uses AI, artificial intelligence, to save lives. That's based on behavior and thought pattern recognition. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's CEO, very recently said, quote, "In the future, AI, artificial intelligence, will be able to understand more of the subtle nuances of language and will be able to identify different issues like suicide and quickly spot more kinds of bullying and hate." Now, the idea of Facebook proactively scanning the content of people's posts could trigger a lot of concern about exactly how else the technology could be applied. And sure, there are beneficial aspects about the technology, but it's just another area where we have very little choice. And Facebook users cannot opt out of this. In other words, Facebook is telling you and me, the public, you just have to trust us on this one. This is all for your good. This is for the public safety, and besides which, we at Facebook are all humanitarians, so nothing can go wrong. There's other highly popular Android applications like Uber and Tinder and Twitter, Snapchat, Spotify, that are all secretly tracking their users, secretly tracking them. And the reason I can tell you this is because Yale University's Privacy Lab did a research testing recently, and they discovered that blogs were discussing research that revealed all sorts of hidden trackers in various popular Android apps that you can get right out of the Google Play Store. And only when the public, in mass, stops using this kind of technology that employs these hidden trackers will the companies ever actually change the way they do business. This is simply Big Brother watching and listening to us. Their long-standing New World Order plan is to control us. And they have carried it out to near perfection, gradually, over time, over a long period of time, so as to not arouse suspicions. And they've done it in every segment of society. Do you know that we are enslaved by our birth certificate? Have you heard about this? Our birth certificate. This was the plan of all the central bankers who met and created this scam back in 1933, after the depression of that era. On April 5th, 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the president of the US at the time, under executive order declared, quote, "All persons are required to deliver on or before May 1st, 1933, all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates now owned by them to a Federal Reserve Bank, branch, or agency, or to any member bank of the Federal Reserve System," end quote. Now, something that is frequently overlooked is that executive orders of the president and proclamations of the president normally have no direct effect upon private citizens, private persons, or their property. Instead, they're normally to constitute only directives or instructions to officers or employers of the federal government. So this order issued by Roosevelt in 1933 was an undisciplined act of treason. 2 months after that, on June 5th, 1933, the Senate and the House of Representatives approved it, and they voted to suspend the gold standard. Translation is the United States government, to provide and do business, to provide goods and services, created a commercial bond. That's a promissory note. And they did it by pledging the property, labor, life, and body of its citizens as payment for the debt, the bankruptcy. So that promissory note, the commercial bond, made chattel, property, out of every man, woman, and child in the United States, and it follows through into Canada as well. We become nothing more than human resources. If you've ever wondered why companies have a human resources department, that's why. They're the resources. They're the ones enslaved to the debt. They're collateral for the debt. And this was done all without the knowledge and consent of the people through the filing, the registering of our birth certificates. Our birth certificate, yours and mine, is simply a statement of our birth. It's a legal document saying that, yeah, you and I exist. Now, we normally carry a wallet-sized copy. However, anybody can get a elongated, large version, a certified copy from the Registrar General, but you have to apply for that. The birth certificate is where this entire con game all began. It's the foundation document. All ID, all government ID is generated from a birth certificate. So if the foundation document, the birth certificate, is invalid, anything made from it is as well. Which means your operator's license, driver's license, and there is a difference between the two. Most everybody says, well, I've got my driver's license. But I guarantee you, with the exception of probably Tim and Pastor Hugh here, if you take it out of your wallet and you look at it, it says operator's license. It doesn't say driver's license. You only need a driver's license if you're doing commerce, if you're working for a company doing business, which is why when you're driving truck in Tim and Pastor Hugh's place, you have to go and get a special classification. You become, what is it, class one? So you have your class 1 driver's license, which enables you to do commerce, do business. Everybody else, your license will say operator's license. And I know this before doing this research because years ago I got out of a ticket because, well, it's a long story, but in short form, I was charged for not stopping at a yield sign, and it was seriously slippery to the point where I wasn't going 10 kilometers. It was just, I was coming off Whitewood onto 53rd Avenue up into Riverbend, and I applied the brakes, and I wasn't even going fast, and I just kept on sliding. And there was not traffic coming, but I didn't stop to yield to look. Well, I was looking, but the cop was just sitting close by, and as soon as I came through, he was like, whoop, whoop. He pulls me over, and he says, you went through that yield sign. I said, well, first of all, there's no way I could stop even at 10 clicks an hour. And I said, you got some pull around here, go check for yourself. It's like glare ice. Get the city to throw some sand down kind of thing. And he says, yeah, fine. And he writes me up, and he hands me the written ticket, and I start reading, and it says, Mr. Furman was driving his vehicle, and I thought, uh-oh, I got this guy. I'm not a driver, I'm an operator. But he worded it that way, and he says, you can fight this in court. And I said, yeah, we'll see you on whatever date. And I showed up, and the day I showed up, he was there, and he came over, and he says, if you just plead guilty, we'll probably get you a reduced rate. And I knew right then that he knew that he made a mistake on the ticket. So I got in front, and when it came to my turn, the judge says, blah, 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 Mr. Furman, what do you plead on this? And I said, I plead not guilty, Your Honor. And she said, and why is that? And I said, well, I explained what I was sort of explaining to you. And I said, plus the terminology on the ticket is incorrect. I'm not a professional driver. And it says I was driving my vehicle. And she just looked at the ticket, looked at me, bang, case dismissed. And the arresting officer, the guy who wrote me the ticket, had to pay the fine. Yeah, it's on him because he was wrong. That's why he was trying so hard before I went into the courtroom to convince me to just plead guilty. We'll cut you a break here, kind of thing. But that's getting back. I kind of went on a bunny trail over here, but if that ID is all generated from a birth certificate, so if it's wrong to begin with, everything is wrong. And that's where the whole con game began, with the birth certificates. And everything comes from that. Not just drivers and operators' licenses, health cards, everything is made from the birth certificate. And it didn't even exist. Birth certificates didn't even exist before 1933 when they hatched this plan. So the elite banking families created a corporate entity with a name identical to yours and mine. In other words, there is a child hidden behind your corporate name. And by law, of course, no one can harm a child. So they had to protect you and me behind the record of your birth. So they made us corporations. On that certified large copy of your birth certificate, there is near the top a line that runs right across. It's called a line of delineation. Now, by law, that means anything that appears below the line can be changed. And they did. And in doing that, they registered and monetized the spirit and soul of a living being. In other words, they made you and me an asset of value for their purpose. And from that step, they created a certificate. Now think stocks and bonds here, certificate. Like gold certificate or silver certificate. A certificate is a share. And our birth certificate is a legal document. And on it you'll find the word extract. In legalese, that means tax. Also on your birth certificate, you will notice that your name is spelled in all capital letters. Have you ever noticed that? Anything that is mailed to you, or even emailed from the government, will be addressed in all capital letters. Because when we use government ID, we're identifying ourselves as a corporation, not an individual. And as such, you are under the jurisdiction of corporate law. Just because you don't know those facts does not exonerate you from liability. In other words, that's no excuse in a court of law, which sees you as a willing participant. The only way out of that is non-compliance. Have you ever wondered, or if you got your birth certificates with you, on the back, there's a number and a letter and then a series of numbers, and it's all in red. It's typed in red. That entire number is known as a CUSIP number. C-U-S-I-P. All securities require a CUSIP number. CUSIP stands for Committee on Uniform Securities Identification Procedures. That committee was formed in 1962. And it developed a system that was implemented in 1967 that identifies securities, specifically U.S. and Canadian registered stocks and U.S. government and municipal bonds. So the red letter on the back and the numbers on the back of your birth certificate represent the share the government owns in you. And it's held as collateral to secure the national debt. So if you're walking around thinking, "Hoo, I'm free. Look at all these rights I have." Well, think again. The bottom line is that you and me and we are owned. We're chattel. Slaves to a very real and evil Big Brother. Because Big Brother / globalist / Illuminati / elite / central bankers, because they own us, is why they can do things that they do to us against our will. It's because we've complied with the whole program. The currency that you have in your pocket or in your wallet, in your purse, actual tangible cash money, That's debt. It does not represent wealth. The things you buy with it are not yours because the currency has a hidden lien against it. That's how and why they can come and just take over your house on your vehicle and confiscate your land, your farm, your livestock, and anything you believe you own. It's because you don't. You're buying stuff with money that's not yours. But what happens when you're unfamiliar with what I've been sharing with you, this information, and unfamiliar with the technology that's out there now, like I described, the ELF technology and other things? You become a victim of it if you don't know about it. ELF technology operates at brainwave level. That means they can implant thoughts into your head. They can even speak to you. And you think it's your own self thinking these things out. They can even use it to play God. Quote scripture at you until you're convinced it's the Holy Spirit talking to me. There are many believers in God right now who would refute what I just said and say, oh, they could never fool me. Well, yeah, they are. They have been, and they will unless we're wise to this. They're deceiving many people in churches today. And when people don't learn how to distinguish God's voice, the one the military has created will fool them every time. Everything about the New World Order is trying to manipulate, control, and destroy us. And if we're not committed to the Most High, El Elyon, God, then we're going to be a victim of all this elf god military technology. And you're going to be a victim of mind control technology, harassment and targeting, if you don't learn what they're all about. We're surrounded by those who want to destroy us because we have the love of Yeshua in us. And those who are evil can't stand that because it reminds them of their future. It reminds them of their loss. It reminds them that they can't win in the long run. It reminds them of their own failures and demise. So they go into attack mode when encountering those who oppose them and are walking with Yeshua. Big Brother's plan continues to push forward. The plan hasn't changed, but the name has. It goes all the way back to Nimrod and the Tower of Babel and the New World Order and the Mystery Babylon. And they've had a different name for every cycle of it through. New World Order to globalists to Big Brother, and now, of course, it's the deep state. That's the one that's pushing at Donald Trump right now. And since his election at U.S. president, their evil wickedness has been on full display. It's clear there's a very high level of sorcery being used that goes right back to Satanism and Luciferianism. The deep state is run by very high-ranking top government officials in Washington that are Luciferians. And they're really seriously unhappy with Mr. Trump's election and the subsequent carrying out of his election campaign promises. He said, I'm going to make America great again. He's a nationalist, and they hate him for that. They're at war with him. And you know why? I think, my thought, Trump is unpredictable. He shoots from the lip. He shoots his mouth off, and no one is sure what to really expect. Even after a year of him being in office, he's still tweeting away and attacking media, and you name it. That's the way he does it. And this is not the deep state's version of what a president is supposed to be. To them, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, they were the good guys. They were globalists. The intelligence establishment and the military-industrial complex knew the situation was well in hand with those good old boys in the White House. Trump is this strange intruder, the crazy one. He's an outsider. He's not a member of their secret society. He doesn't know all the secret handshakes and then the language of sedition and all those other symbolic things that they use. He's not from that world. Plus, he's not on board with their plans. The deep state is intent on sabotaging Americans and keeping them as slaves, as human resources, collateral against the nation's debt. Because there's this underbelly of fat cats in Washington, the ones who have spent a lifetime involved in federal bureaucracy, working with lobbyists, they're in each other's back pockets. They're the professional deal makers, the what's in it for me bunch. They're the ones that want to protect their own establishment, their careers, their jobs, their investments in oil and everything. I mean, they're trading internationally. They're the globalists. And they hate Trump's idea of building a wall. I mean, they want to tear down all the walls and make this their new, long-awaited New World Order. One of their big linchpin issues is immigration. Of course, it always was. And the deep state is outraged because they want open borders forever. And their masters, who are a lot more cynical and calculating, are forcing the unending migrant flood of people as a method for erasing separate nations, which is a big plank, a prime plank in their globalist platform. If you have two working brain cells, any fool can figure this out, or should be able to. It has nothing to do with being humane and being understanding and loving to all these immigrants coming in. That's garbage. The heaping of financial burdens on states and nations is an outcome of this incoming migrant flood. And that's intentional. They want that to happen. So is the crime that's resulting from all of this. They're not illusions. Now, how serious Mr. Trump is about stemming the flood of these immigrants, well, that's still up for grabs. It's still to be determined. But the fact that he's spoken out time and time again, even if you assume he's lying, he's galvanized people all over the world. They're waking up to the resurrection of a sovereign nations again, as opposed to this one world nation under the globalist utopian tyrants. Now, if Trump's stance on immigration is just a con, boy, has it ever had a massive blowback effect against the New World Order. And he's attacked the intelligence community, as well as the FBI, not just once, many times. I mean, when he first started this chant, this drumbeat of his, one of the senators, I remember Schumer, I think it is, yeah, he said, boy, this guy's crazy. This is a big mistake because the intelligence community has, quote, 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. Notice he didn't say that Trump was wrong. He just said he's crazy, this guy. He's not like everybody else in Washington. And you know what? That might be a clue, in my opinion. Trump just doesn't care about the established deep state guard in Washington because he doesn't belong. He's not a member of that club. He grew up as a hustler in the real estate market in that field. I mean, he rubbed elbows with the mob. He made deals however they could be made with whoever showed up with the money. He survived all of that. He went broke. Then he started up again, and he's become a billionaire, and in the process developed this gigantic ego. He promoted himself relentlessly once he achieved a bit of fame. And in his world, bureaucrats are the lowest form of human life. He's just a hard-charging a-hole. He's a cowboy. And you know what? I have a sense that after a few drinks, he'd gladly admit that to you. This is not a character that the deep state wants around, especially not in the White House. On that level alone, Trump has not endeared himself to all the higher-ups in the deep state. However, behind all of that is the real direction emanating from this ancient source of power. It's Luciferian in scale, and it has been an objective in the founding of America as a country. The deep state / Big Brother has planned to establish a new state, a new form of democracy based on the Atlantean scheme and the early Freemasons in the United States. Big Brother's evil is everywhere. It surrounds us. Big deal. Big deal. It always has been around us from the time of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, and it will always be around us until Yeshua comes back to end it. Aliens, demons, Satan, hybrids, possessed people, they're not going to go away. Should we be aware of them? Yeah. Should they bother us? Not to the point where they can't live, or a person can't live without focusing on them or glorifying them. Exposing them is one thing, glorifying them is another. And not all are called to expose these things. Father God will anoint and stand up some of his people to speak for him, to warn, to encourage, to strengthen his own against our enemies. He never leads us to focus on them. We're supposed to be focused on Yeshua, glorifying him. He is our hope and our joy and our strength, our victor in the battles that we face against him. Are you at peace? Do you feel the joy of Jesus in you? Do you?
Yes.
Maybe if your joy is running a little low, we can all turn to John chapter 2 right now. John chapter 2 verse 1. This passage is, I think, a good illustration of what we can do to recapture the joy of Jesus. And I gotta admit, everything I just said to you is not really joyful about the New World Order and all of that stuff. It isn't when you hear about it. But we have Yeshua. So John chapter 2, starting in verse 1. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there. Now we usually, only hear about Mary in predominance when we hear the story of her being pregnant and giving birth to Yeshua eventually. However, obviously, if Jesus is at the wedding in Cana in Galilee, Mary actually raised a grown man here. Jesus is a grown man. Some people don't realize that truth alone. They leave him in the cradle. Pope Francis, just last week during his Christmas message, if any of you saw it, heard it, no? Well, he said, it was right out of the Devil's Sermon Book. Pope Francis called for Jerusalem to be divided, and he wants people to see the baby Jesus as a means to somehow bring peace to the Middle East. What a ridiculous statement. Absolutely. This is totally non-biblical. There is no baby Jesus. There isn't. He doesn't exist. The Pope and many other people don't ever get to the cross, where they leave Jesus on the cross. They don't ever get to the empty tomb to realize that what he came to do, he did, and what was done to him, he defeated. And he reigns forever. And now he lives within our hearts. Oh, I took another right turn on a rabbit trail. Okay, back to the text here. Verse 1 here in John 2. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, wine gone? Joy of Jesus is our strength. Wine often symbolizes joy. Some people can never have any joy or fun unless they have the wine. I'm just saying. Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. And Jesus says something none of us should ever say to our mother. He said, woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come. So his mother says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Okay, back to verse 2. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. Think of it this way. God has something special in store for you and me, but it's by invitation only. Do you sometimes get surprised when you see someone out of context? And by that I mean, I remember back in my junior high days, grade 8, grade 9, every Saturday I used to be on the bus going to take my drum lesson in an area of Winnipeg. And one day I'm on the bus and I'm riding, and my grade 8 English teacher, Miss Billick, gets on the bus. First of all, I was crushing hard on Miss Billick. I thought she was just great. I don't know if she could teach English or not. I just kind of enjoyed looking at her. But never mind, she gets on the bus and she sees me and walks over and sits down beside me. Now, hi, Jerry. And Miss Billick, what are you doing here? As if she doesn't have a life, you know. But in my mind, it made no sense for her to be outside the classroom. I just figured that's where she lived. That's where she kind of resided and did her thing. So I was surprised to see her on a public city bus on the streets of Winnipeg accompanying me for a ride. And in John 2:2 here, we're shown Jesus at a wedding. Not officiating at the wedding. He just showed up. Because why?
He was invited.
He was invited. Maybe we should be inviting Jesus to show up in our lives a little bit more, to regenerate the joy of Jesus. And in this gospel, it was kind of surprising because John's gospel it goes way back to a time from before the cradle and Yeshua's birth. Because John's writings start with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So it backs up from that whole manger scene to show that the Word was made flesh in the cradle, was pre-existent in the cosmos. Last week, Pastor Hugh was talking about fears, that they will block our blessings and will bring on pains in certain areas. And when I was reading this particular scripture and thinking about it, it helped me a lot because, yeah, I get a little upset and fearful at certain things. I don't like getting attacked by weapons, and sometimes I get into that mode of, oh boy, another day I'm up, they're going to be at me. But when I started looking into this, in the beginning was the Word, pre-existing in the cosmos before actually showing up in the flesh in the cradle, it made me realize that our Yeshua, the infinite, came as an infant. But he's been there and is there and has been there all along. He spoke the Word into my situation before any of my struggles ever began. And he knows the end from the beginning. And he will perfect that which concerns me. Yeah, it made me think, what am I even afraid of anything for? I mean, seriously, he's got it all figured out. He's done everything for us. That's why he tells us to fear not and believe only in him. And that's how we can know in our hearts that he's going to finish what he started, and he is going to do it again. He spoke it before it started. All we need to do is believe what he said and remain in joy and thanksgiving until it manifests in our physical lives. And when we invite him into every part of our lives, he will give us the victory. And he can only work with what we give him. He can only transform what we give him to transform. Yeah, of course we need to be aware of what is around us, like what Big Brother and everybody else associated with the dark side are trying to do, but we don't lose sight of the one who can handle all that and deal with those things, and he goes before us to do that. He always is with us. It's about him, not them, not the very real and evil Big Brother. Jesus said, draw nigh to me, get close to me, and I will draw nigh, get close to you. He is God, he is King, he is Savior, and he is our very good and loving Big Brother, not the other one. He's the Big Brother we want. He gave his life on the cross for the entire world. He's already said that he will never leave or forsake us, and is with us even to the end of this age. That's the best truth you can have and understand and rely on. Yeah, these are the last days. And the beast agenda is alive and operating. And it may seem as if the bad guys are winning. But you know what? That's precisely what Father God has always planned for them to think.
They were wrong.
Yeah. We are reminded and we're told that Yeshua will return without warning. He doesn't even know when he's coming back. Only the Father knows the day and the time. So while the deep state continues to do evil, wickedness, and hurt and destroy so much of God's creation, thinking that they're in the clear, remember the words of 2 Peter 3, verses 10 and 11. 2 Peter 3, verses 10 and 11. But the day of Yeshua will come like a thief. On that day, the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will melt and disintegrate, and the earth and everything done on it shall be exposed. And the earth and everything done on it shall be exposed. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what kind of people should you be? Live your lives in holiness and godliness. We must continue to walk in the kingdom ways, and in love and forgiveness and kindness and compassion and harmony and unity, and remain steadfast in those ways. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge when all around us we are targeted for doing these things. We're made to pray. Yeah, it's tough. But boy, is it worth it. Holy. Staying the course ensures us the victory over the very real and very evil big brother. So stay the course. Amen.